So, you are staring down the barrel of the AB-900 certification.
Oh, yeah.
Microsoft 365 Copilot and Agent Administration Fundamentals.
Mm.
And let's be entirely honest right out of the gate here. You do not need us to sit here and read a Wikipedia summary of what artificial intelligence actually is.
No, absolutely not.
And you definitely do not need another generic pep talk on how to pace yourself during a multiple choice exam either. You're an IT professional, you're a system admin, or maybe a solutions architect.
Right.
You are here to master the technical architecture. So our mission for this deep dive is to essentially rip the lid off this certification and get into the actual administrative mechanics.
Yeah, that is really the only way to tackle this exam effectively. We're bypassing the marketing fluff entirely. Deploying Copilot isn't just flipping a switch in the admin portal and suddenly everyone has a magic digital assistant.
I wish it was.
Right. But it is, without exaggeration, the most rigorous stress test your organization's entire Microsoft 365 architecture will ever face.
100%.
If your SharePoint permissions are a tangled mess of legacy tech debt, Copilot will expose that immediately. I mean, if your data governance strategy is non-existent, Copilot is going to take those vulnerabilities and just amplify them at machine speed.
Exactly. So we are going to look at the exact blueprint you need to secure your tenant in the real world, which conveniently happens to map perfectly to the three core areas the exam tests.
Which are the foundational M365 features, data protection and governance, and then the actual administration of Copilot and custom agents.
Yeah, the three pillars. And I want to start with that foundational piece, that first 30% of the exam. Before we even talk about prompt engineering or AI agents, let's talk about the absolute basics of access.
The ground floor.
The ground floor. If I'm an administrator tasked with rolling out Copilot to say, a 5,000 user enterprise, I am absolutely not going into the admin center and clicking 5,000 individual checkboxes to assign licenses.
Please don't do that.
Right. So how are we actually building this foundation so it doesn't immediately become an administrative nightmare?
You'd be surprised how many organizations try the manual approach and instantly regret it. The exam will heavily test your understanding of Microsoft Entra ID. Specifically, the distinction between user objects and group objects when it comes to scalable administration.
Right.
You have to use group-based licensing. It is basically the only way to survive. In Entra ID, you create a security group. Let's say you call it Copilot license users. You take your Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 license and your Copilot add-on license, and you assign them directly to that security group.
Which means the moment a user is dropped into that group, the Entra ID sync process automatically provisions the licenses.
Exactly.
And more importantly, when an employee leaves the company, or maybe they change roles and get pulled out of that group, the license is instantly revoked and goes back into the pool.
And that dynamic revocation is critical for cost management, especially considering the price of these specific licenses. But let's go a layer deeper into the identity configuration, because the AB-900 expects you to know the prerequisites before that license even works. When you spin up a tenant, you get that default on Microsoft.com routing domain.
Right, the ugly one.
The ugly one. Well, Copilot requires a perfectly clean identity foundation. You have to ensure your custom domain names are verified and properly configured so that the user principal name, the UPN, matches their primary SMTP address.
Ah, okay. So if they don't match...
If you have legacy Active Directory sync issues where the UPNs are mismatched or routing is broken, Copilot is going to fail to authenticate properly across the different Microsoft 365 services. It just won't work smoothly.
That brings up a massive point of friction I see all the time. And I know it's a huge exam trap.
Yeah.
The Microsoft ecosystem is just huge, and Microsoft loves giving us a different admin center for every single workload.
They really do.
When an admin is tasked with configuring the underlying storage or the communication pipelines that Copilot is going to interact with, where do they actually go? I feel like half the battle is just knowing which portal to log into.
It's a very fair criticism of the ecosystem. And you will absolutely see scenario questions designed to test if you know your way around the portals. You need to map the distinct workloads in your head.
So let's break them down.
Let's take the Exchange Online Admin Center first. This is strictly for mail flow, mailboxes, and legacy distribution lists. If a scenario asks you to configure a shared mailbox for the customer support team, you are in Exchange.
Makes sense.
But keep in mind, a distribution list does not provision a collaborative workspace. It just blasts emails. Copilot can summarize an email thread sent to a distribution list, but the list itself isn't a storage container.
Right, because if we want actual storage, if we're building a document repository for a massive new project that Copilot is going to crawl, we are going to the SharePoint Admin Center.
Exactly. SharePoint is the foundational storage layer. In the SharePoint Admin Center, you are managing site collections, document libraries, and the inheritance of permissions down to the folder level.
And why is that specific portal so critical for AI?
Because Copilot relies entirely on the semantic index, which crawls SharePoint to understand the relationships between your files and your users. If you need to configure external sharing settings, say preventing a specific HR site from being shared with external guests, you do that in the SharePoint admin portal.
Okay, got it. And then, of course, there's the Teams Admin Center.
Teams is your collaboration hub. You go there for meeting policies, managing which third-party apps are allowed, and configuring channel architectures.
So how does the exam test the overlap between them?
The trick for the exam is understanding how these three integrate. When a user clicks Create Team inside the Teams client, the system automatically spins up a Microsoft 365 group in Entra ID, an associated SharePoint site for the File tab, and a group mailbox in exchange for calendar invites.
We're all tied together.
They are intertwined, yeah. But as an admin, you use the distinct portals to manage the specific policies for those distinct workloads.
Okay, so the users exist, the groups are licensing them, and our workloads are routed correctly. My immediate sort of terrifying thought as an architect is the perimeter.
The security side.
Yeah, let's say we have a user. Their account is fully licensed for Copilot, and an attacker manages to compromise their credentials. That attacker doesn't just get access to an inbox anymore.
Not at all.
They get a highly sophisticated AI assistant that can rapidly query, summarize, and exfiltrate the entire corporate data set in a matter of seconds. How are we mechanically locking down this perimeter before Copilot is even turned on?
That nightmare scenario is exactly why Zero Trust architecture is so heavily emphasized on this certification. We have to move completely away from the outdated idea of a trusted corporate network.
The old castle and moat model.
Right, it's dead. Zero Trust dictates that we verify explicitly, use least privileged access, and assume breach. But practically speaking, in Entra ID, verify explicitly means moving beyond simple passwords. We rely heavily on conditional access policies.
Let's spend some time on conditional access. Because if you don't understand how to build those policies, you are going to fail the security portion of this exam.
You definitely will.
Walk me through a real-world, bulletproof conditional access policy for a Copilot environment.
Let's build one right now. In Entra ID, a conditional access policy evaluates signals at the exact moment of authentication. First, you define the assignments. Who does this apply to?
Let's target our Copilot license users group we made earlier.
Perfect. Next, what are they trying to access? We select the Office 365 Cloud app, which encompasses all the Copilot services. Now, the crucial part. The conditions. We can specify the device platform, a location, say, blocking any IP address outside of North America, and the client app, whether they're using a browser or a desktop client.
But the real power comes in the grant controls, right? What happens when those conditions are actually met?
Exactly. We can configure the grant controls to require multi-factor authentication, but we can go much further. We can select Require Device to be marked as compliance.
Which means
This means the user's device must be enrolled in Microsoft Intune and meet your corporate security baselines, like having BitLocker enabled and an active firewall, before Entra ID issues the token to access Copilot.
so if an attacker steals the password and tries to log in from a random laptop at a coffee shop,
The conditional access policy looks at the device state, sees it isn't Intune compliant, and blocks the access entirely, even with the right password.
that is incredibly powerful. But what about session risks? Let's say the device is compliant, the user's in the right location, but their credentials were just found in a dark web dump an hour ago. How does the system handle that dynamically?
That brings in Microsoft Entra ID protection, which feeds directly into your conditional access policies. ID protection uses machine learning to evaluate sign-in risk and user risk.
Give me an example of sign-in risk.
If a user logs in from New York and 10 minutes later a login attempt happens from Tokyo, that's an impossible travel scenario. ID protection flags that sign-in as high risk. You can have a conditional access policy that states, if sign-in risk is high, block access.
And user risk.
User risk is what you mentioned, credentials found on the dark web. You could set a policy saying, if user risk is high, require a secure password reset before granting access to the Copilot environment.
That covers the end users. But honestly, the end users aren't always my biggest worry. It's the admin accounts.
Oh, for sure.
If my global admin account gets popped, The attacker owns the entire tenant. How does the exam expect us to secure privileged identities?
The answer is privileged identity management, or PM. The days of having 5 IT guys walking around with permanent global administrator rights 24/7 are over.
Long gone.
It violates the principle of least privilege. With PM, you transition those admins to eligible assignments.
Meaning they don't actually have the power until they explicitly ask for it.
Correct. It's just-in-time access. When you need to make a change in the Exchange Admin Center, you log into PM, request activation of your Exchange Administrator role, provide a ticket number as a business justification, and depending on the configuration, you might need a secondary admin to approve the request.
And it's temporary, right?
Yes. Once activated, the role only lasts for a predefined window, say 4 hours, and then it automatically drops back down to standard user privileges. It drastically shrinks the window of opportunity for an attacker.
Okay, let's talk about visibility.
Right.
Let's say we have PM, we have conditional access, but something still feels off. A help desk ticket comes in saying Copilot is acting strangely, or we suspect an account might be compromised. We need forensic data. What logs are we actually digging into?
Your primary forensic dashboard is the Unified Audit Log, the UAL. It's located in the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal, and the exam will test your knowledge of what is actually recorded there.
What's the scope of it?
It's massive. Every single file accessed in SharePoint, every Copilot prompt submitted, every sensitivity label downgraded, and every admin setting changed is logged in the UAL.
But if we need to correlate that data, because reading raw logs row by row is impossible when you have millions of events coming in.
That's where Microsoft Defender XDR Extended Detection and Response comes into play. XDR ingests signals from Entra ID, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, and Defender for Cloud Apps.
So it's pulling from everywhere.
Everywhere. And it uses Advanced Custo Query Language, or KQL, to hunt through those logs.
So how does that look in practice for an AI threat?
If an attacker breaches an identity, disables an antivirus service on the endpoint, and then uses Copilot to search for financial projections, XDR correlates those seemingly separate events into a single, cohesive incident timeline for the security team to investigate.
That is brilliant. Okay, that secures the perimeter and gives us visibility. But let's move into the heaviest section of the exam, which makes up about 40% of the objectives: data protection and governance.
It's a big one.
The perimeter's locked down. But what happens when the threat isn't an external attacker? What happens when a legitimate employee sitting on a compliant corporate laptop asks Copilot to summarize the Q4 financials, and Copilot accidentally pulls data from a highly sensitive HR document about upcoming layoffs?
This is the single biggest fear holding companies back from deploying AI. To pass this exam, and honestly to survive as an admin, you have to understand the exact mechanics of the Microsoft Graph and the semantic index.
Let's unpack that.
Copilot does not have a secret backdoor to your data. It does not bypass your security. When a user submits a prompt, Copilot relies on the semantic index, which is essentially a sophisticated map of all the data and relationships in your tenant, to find the answer. But the Microsoft Graph enforces a strict boundary.
Which is?
Copilot only retrieves information that the specific user submitting the prompt already has explicit permission to read.
Copilot only knows what the user knows. If they don't have read access to the SharePoint folder containing those layoff documents, Copilot literally cannot see it. It is entirely invisible to the AI.
Exactly. But here is the massive caveat, and this is the crux of the data governance pillar. If that user technically has read access to the layoff document, maybe because 3 years ago an HR manager accidentally dumped it into a public team site, Copilot will absolutely find it, read it, and put it in the summary.
Which means Copilot isn't the actual security risk. The decade of neglected SharePoint permissions is the risk. Copilot is just a really fast flashlight shining into the dark corners of your tenant.
That is the perfect analogy.
So, if we can't manually audit 10 million files across the enterprise before turning on Copilot, what is the automated solution?
You deploy the Microsoft Purview suite, starting with information protection and sensitivity labels. A sensitivity label is a persistent cryptographic tag embedded directly into the metadata of a file or an email. You can configure labels like general, confidential, and highly confidential.
And you aren't relying on users to remember to click the highly confidential button every time, right?
Well,
because they just won't do it.
You can allow them to apply it manually, but for true governance, you use auto-labeling policies in Purview.
How does this work?
You create a policy that scans the environment in the background. If it detects a document containing credit card numbers or secret project code names or specific financial keywords, Purview automatically slaps the highly confidential label on it.
Okay, so the file is labeled. How does that mechanically interact with the Copilot prompt?
This is a brilliant piece of architecture. Let's say a document is labeled highly confidential, and the label settings enforce encryption, restricting access only to the finance team Untra group.
Got it.
If an intern outside that group asks Copilot a question, the graph respects the encryption. The document is ignored.
Right.
But what if a legitimate finance team member asks Copilot to summarize that exact highly confidential document? Copilot will read it and generate the summary. But, and this is the critical exam point, the AI-generated response, the chat output itself, automatically inherits that highly confidential sensitivity label.
That is massive. So the user can't just take a summary of an encrypted document, highlight the text, and paste it into a totally unprotected, unencrypted Word document.
Exactly. The classification travels with the data. It forces the AI output to respect the highest level of classification of the input data.
That solves so many compliance headaches. But classification is only half the battle. What if that legitimate finance user takes that labeled Copilot summary and tries to email it to a competitor or upload it to a personal Dropbox account?
That's where we move from classification to exfiltration prevention. We need to talk about Purview Data Loss Prevention, or DLP.
Right, DLP.
Sensitivity labels classify and encrypt, DLP monitors and blocks. In the Purview portal, you configure DLP rules based on conditions. You might create a rule that says, if content contains U.S. financial data and the user is attempting to share it with people outside my organization, then block the action and send an incident report to the compliance admin.
How deep does that actually go, though? Does DLP scan the Copilot chat interface itself?
Yes, it does. Microsoft has integrated DLP directly into the Copilot interaction.
Oh, okay.
If a user prompts Copilot to aggregate a massive list of customer social security numbers and then attempts to copy that data into a Teams chat with an external guest, the DLP policy evaluates the content in real time. It blocks the message from sending and pops up a policy tip for the user explaining that they just violated corporate data handling procedures.
For the exam, what's the takeaway there?
You need to understand how to build those rule conditions and where to review the DLP alerts in the Purview portal.
What about the sheer volume of data? You mentioned the semantic index earlier. If we have 10 years of outdated policies, old project files, and redundant data sitting in SharePoint, doesn't that degrade the quality of Copilot's answers?
Heavily.
Like, if I ask for the current travel policy, Copilot might pull a document from 2016.
It absolutely degrades the quality. Stale data is the enemy of accurate AI. This is where Purview data lifecycle management comes in. You need to implement retention policies.
Walk me through those.
A retention policy allows you to legally mandate that certain data, like tax records, must be kept for exactly 7 years. But it also has a deletion component. You can create a policy that automatically deletes any file in the marketing ShowPoint site that hasn't been modified in 3 years.
So it's actively cleaning up.
Yes. By aggressively purging stale data, you are actively cleaning the semantic index, which reduces your risk surface and guarantees Copilot is generating answers based on current, relevant information.
Let's shift gears to auditing user behavior. The perimeter is secure, the data is labeled and protected by DLP, and the old files are deleted. But what if we suspect an employee is actively trying to misuse the AI?
Like prompt injection.
Yeah, maybe they are trying to manipulate the LLM, or they are generating inappropriate content. How are we tracking that?
You need to understand the distinction between two specific Purview tools for the exam: insider risk management and communication compliance. The exam will definitely try to trick you by mixing up their use cases.
Okay, let's separate them. What's insider risk management?
Insider risk management is all about analyzing user behavior and intent over a timeline. It uses machine learning models to look for anomalies. If an employee submits their resignation in the HR system, and the next day they download 50 gigabytes of data from SharePoint and execute a massive string of highly specific Copilot prompts querying intellectual property.
That's a huge red flag.
Exactly. Insider risk management connects those dots. It detects the sequence of risky behaviors and alerts you to potential data theft before they walk out the door.
So insider risk is about the behavioral pattern. What is communication compliance then?
Communication compliance looks at the actual content of the messages. It scans Teams chats, Exchange emails, and yes, Copilot interactions for specific text patterns.
Like harassment or profanity.
Right. If an employee is using Copilot to generate harassing language, or if they are discussing regulatory violations or illegal activities, communication compliance policies detect those keywords or sentiments and flag the exact conversation for HR or legal review.
There is a brand new acronym on the AB-900 syllabus that we have to cover because it is going to catch people off guard. DSPM for AI. Data Security Posture Management for AI. What is this, and why do administrators care?
This is Microsoft addressing the reality of shadow AI. Your users aren't just using the sanctioned Microsoft Copilot.
Oh, they're using everything they can find online.
They are going out to the web and pasting sensitive corporate code or financial data into third-party, unmanaged large language models. DSPM for AI is a capability within Purview designed to give you visibility into your organization's entire AI footprint.
So it tracks what else they are using.
It discovers where users are interacting with unsanctioned AI applications, assesses the risk level of those third-party connected apps, and helps you apply controls to ensure your sensitive data isn't bleeding out into public training models.
Let's address the most common admin trauma. I want to go back to that scenario of the HR manager who accidentally dumped the layoff document into a public site. The reality is, most tenants are suffering from a decade of horrific oversharing.
It's endemic.
Users click Share with everyone in my organization because it's the fastest way to stop getting permission-denied errors. If an admin is staring down an AI rollout in 3 weeks, they do not have the time to manually audit and fix item-level permissions on 10 million files. What is the technical solution to stop oversharing dead in its tracks?
First, you have to find the worst offenders. In the SharePoint Admin Center, you run Data Access Governance, or DAGG reports.
The DAG reports.
That's right. You can configure a DAG report specifically for sharing links. It will generate a massive CSV export that shows you exactly which sites have the highest volume of files shared with everyone except external users or highly permissive guest links. It gives you a targeted hit list of your riskiest site collections.
Okay, so the report says the finance site is an absolute disaster. How do I fix it without breaking everyone's workflow but ensuring Copilot can't surface it to the whole company?
You leverage SharePoint Advanced Management, often called SAM. This is an advanced add-on that provides a feature called Restricted Access Control, or RAC, policies. This is an absolute game changer.
How does a RAC policy work?
Instead of trying to untangle thousands of broken file permissions, an administrator applies a RAC policy at the highest level, the site collection level. You configure the policy so that only members of a specific Entra ID security group, for instance, the authorized finance staff group, can access the site.
So even if a file deep inside that site has a link explicitly granting access to everyone, the RAC policy overrides it.
Exactly. The site-level RAC policy acts as an impenetrable ceiling. If an intern clicks that old sharing link, access is denied. And because access is denied to the user, access is inherently denied to Copilot.
That is incredible.
It is the most powerful tool an admin has to instantly quarantine overshared environments prior to turning on AI.
Okay, we have built the foundation. We have rigorously locked down the data and the permissions. Now we can finally transition to Pillar 3, Copilot and Agent Administration. This is the final 30% of the exam.
The fun stuff.
The data is safe. Now we actually have to manage the AI tools themselves. And it's not just one tool anymore. If a business unit comes to IT and says, we want to use AI, how does an architect choose the right tool? And more importantly, how do we handle the billing?
You have to map the business requirement to the right tier of AI, and the exam expects you to know the differences. Tier 1 is the standard Copilot from Microsoft 365.
What's the use case there?
This is your general-purpose assistant embedded in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, and Outlook. It's designed for everyday productivity, drafting an email, summarizing a chaotic Teams meeting, creating a quick PowerPoint deck.
And the billing for that is straightforward.
Very straightforward. It's a standard per-user, monthly or annual subscription. You assign the license and Entra ID, and the user has unlimited access to those standard capabilities. But standard Copilot hits a wall when a department needs highly specialized, complex workflows. That brings us to Tier 2. Role-based or specialized agents. The syllabus explicitly calls out agents like the researcher and the analyst.
When would I deploy the researcher agent instead of just asking standard Copilot a question?
Standard Copilot is great for summarizing a few documents. The researcher agent is fine-tuned for deep multi-source synthesis. If a legal team needs to analyze 50 different case law documents and generate a comprehensive, fully cited academic report, the researcher agent has the architectural depth to handle that context, window, and output formatting.
And the analyst?
The analyst agent, on the other hand, is built for heavy data manipulation. If you point it at a massive database or a complex financial model, it can identify complex trends, run forecasts, and generate advanced visualizations that standard Copilot would completely struggle with.
But what if neither of those fit? What if HR wants an AI assistant that solely answers questions based on our internal employee handbook and benefits policies and guides users through the leave of absence workflow?
That is Tier 3, custom agents. You build these using low-code platforms like Microsoft Copilot Studio. An HR admin can literally use natural language to instruct Copilot Studio to build an agent, point it strictly at the HR SharePoint document library as its only knowledge source, and define a specific persona.
But we have to talk about the billing here because custom agents can get expensive.
Absolutely. While standard Copilot is a flat license fee, when you start building custom agents, especially those that process massive amounts of data in SharePoint, or reach out via APIs to external SQL databases, you are consuming Azure compute resources.
So it's metered.
Yes, this introduces pay-as-you-go billing tied directly to an Azure subscription. As an admin, you have to monitor these Azure meters closely. If a custom agent goes viral internally and is running millions of queries against a database, your pay-as-you-go consumption costs will skyrocket.
Walk me through the life cycle of that custom agent. The HR rep builds this brilliant benefits agent in Copilot Studio. They hit publish. It doesn't just magically appear in everyone's team's client, right?
No, and thank goodness it doesn't. Microsoft built a rigorous approval pipeline, and you will be tested on the exact click path. When the creator hits Publish in Copilot Studio, the system packages the agent and sends it to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center.
How does it go?
It lands in the integrated apps blade under a pending approval status. It is totally invisible to the end users.
So the IT admin has to intervene. What are they actually looking for during that review?
The admin clicks on the pending agent and reviews its manifest. They check exactly what data sources the agent is trying to access, what graph API permissions it's requesting, and whether it aligns with corporate security policies. If it looks malicious or overly permissive, they reject it. If it's legitimate, they click Approve.
But approving it doesn't mean deploying it to the whole company.
Correct. After approval, you manage its availability. Just like you wouldn't deploy specialized accounting software to the marketing team, you don't deploy an HR agent to everyone immediately. In the integrated apps blade, the admin selects Assign Users and restricts the agent's availability to a specific Entra ID security group, maybe just deploying it to the HR team first for a pilot test phase.
Okay, the agents are approved, the licenses are assigned, and we are live. Day 2 operations. A month goes by, and the CIO walks in and asks, "We just spent a fortune on these Copilot licenses. Is anyone actually using them to save time, or are they just using it to write passive-aggressive emails faster?" How do we provide actual ROI metrics?
You head straight to the Copilot dashboard, which is integrated into Viva Insights and accessible via the M365 Admin Center. This is your adoption telemetry hub.
Does it just show login counts?
It goes way beyond a raw count of logins. It shows you active usage metrics broken down by application. You can see that your finance team is heavily utilizing Copilot in Excel to write formulas, while the sales team is mostly using it in Teams to summarize client calls. It even provides aggregated insights into how much time is potentially being saved across the organization, which is exactly the data the CIO wants to see.
But telemetry is just passive monitoring. What about proactive management? The syllabus talks about managing prompts. Why does an IT admin care about what users are typing into the chat box?
Because in an AI-driven environment, a highly optimized prompt is essentially a piece of valuable corporate code. If a financial analyst spends 3 days crafting the perfect complex prompt that generates a flawless end-of-month reconciliation report, that prompt shouldn't live only on their local machine.
That makes sense.
As an admin, you can manage prompts libraries. You can take that highly effective prompt, save it to the organizational library, and share it so the entire finance department can utilize it. You can even schedule prompts to run automatically.
What about removing them?
You are also responsible for prompt hygiene. If a shared prompt becomes outdated because a back-end database changed, or if it violates a new compliance policy, the admin must go into the library and delete or modify it to ensure users aren't generating bad data.
Let's round this out with the operational monitoring of those custom agents we built. If the HR agent starts throwing errors, Or we want to know how many questions it successfully answered without needing a human handoff. Where do we go? Because I know it's not the M365 Admin Center.
This is the final critical distinction for the exam. Understanding the split-brain nature of custom agent administration.
Split brain.
Yeah. The Microsoft 365 Admin Center is where you handle the high-level approval, the availability, and the Entra ID group access. But custom agents are fundamentally built on the Power Platform architecture. Copilot Studio sits right alongside Power Apps and Power Automate. So if you need to dive into the deep operational telemetry, analyzing the exact conversation transcripts, tracking the error rates of specific API calls, or managing the underlying Power Platform environments, you have to use the Microsoft Power Platform Admin Center.
So they live in two different worlds.
Exactly. Furthermore, this is where you configure Power Platform data loss prevention policies specifically for the agent. For example, you can create a policy in the Power Platform Admin Center that strictly prohibits the HR agent from taking data it pulls from a secure SQL database and posting it to a public connector like Twitter. You must know which admin portal performs which task.
We have covered a monumental amount of ground here. From the foundational routing of domains and Entra ID groups, deep into the mechanics of conditional access in PM, through the heavy governance of purview sensitivity labels, DLP, and SharePoint Advanced Management, all the way to the deployment and lifecycle monitoring of Copilot and custom agents.
The AB-900 is an intense certification, but if you step back, the narrative is very clear. It is an architecture test, not an AI test. Microsoft is ensuring that you understand that Copilot is entirely dependent on your existing security hygiene.
It's all about the foundation.
Exactly. If your identities are weak, if your data is unclassified, if your SharePoint is overshared, AI will simply automate your vulnerabilities. But if you implement zero trust, if you rigorously apply purview governance, and if you manage your agents through strict approval pipelines, you transform Copilot into a secure, revolutionary enterprise tool.
I want to leave you with one final thought as you head into your exam preps, specifically thinking about the semantic index and how Copilot respects existing permissions. We spend so much time, money, and stress worrying about highly sophisticated external cyber attacks.
We really do.
But consider this. If Copilot is the ultimate flashlight, perfectly mirroring your existing access controls, is your organization's biggest AI security threat actually a Russian state-sponsored hacker? Or is it simply the forgotten 10-year-old SharePoint folder permissions that a stressed-out intern accidentally granted to the entire company back in 2016, just waiting for Copilot to perfectly summarize it in a single prompt? Understand the architecture, clean up the data, and you will absolutely crush the AB-900.